Previously on Nerd Punches Nerd.
Should we end the show with a shout out with our own Sam's Complaint Corner? I could do.
I don't think so.
Okay, fine. I will hold my impressions for later.
Hello and welcome to Nerd Punches Nerd, the only podcast where a bunch of nerds pretend to physically fight over minor pop culture minutia. And today, it's me, Jeremy, here with Mr. Benj. How you doing?
How's it going?
And we're just going to have what we like to call a mini podcast, where we just talk about a little subject that the two of us are interested in. Last time we talked about You're the Worst. This time we're going to talk about the Westworld Worst. So, before we get into it, I just want to do a brief shout out to Carrie Fisher, who just passed away. BDE, RIP, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she was pretty iconic.
Yeah. I mean, some people may remember her best from, the bikini thing, but I'll always remember her from her uncredited role as the therapist in Austin Powers.
She wasn't credited for that?
I don't think so. I think there were, a lot of uncredited people in that movie.
I mean, she was a noticeable character in it. It was clearly her.
No, it was her. I don't think she was credited in the actual credits.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, she's Carrie Fisher. I mean, Princess Leia needs no explanation. So it'd be sad to see her go, definitely. And I think it was great though that she was able to do Force Awakens though. That's it's a nice thing to be able to have that there. So that you can have a broader scope of the Princess Leia canon.
Right.
So.
There's by the way, I just checked, and it is indeed uncredited. There's two other things that you may know and you may not know. Mm-hmm. In Family Guy, she had a recurring role as Angela, Peter's boss, which I didn't,
really?
Yeah, I didn't even know that. I was like, who is that? Is that Candice Bergen? And it's like, oh no, it's Princess Leia. And what's interesting is that she actually, you remember how how Family Guy had these Star Wars spoofs?
Uh-huh.
She actually played Mon Mothma in that episode.
Okay.
Which is kind of
cool.
funny. Well, I'm just saying, it's kind of
she had a pretty good sense of humor about things. Because she had that one woman show I saw a part of where she's talking about her life and talking about her issues and stuff, and I think some battles with addiction and stuff like that. So she was what was I gonna say? It was a humorous thing. So she in general I think was pretty fun loving, mm-hmm. About different things. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing was she was in this great 30 Rock episode from the season 2 called Rosemary's Baby, where she played this mm-hmm. older female writer that Liz sort of thinks is great, and she almost quits her job over it until she realizes that she lives in a terrible apartment, and her apartment is, her life is kind of bad. And so as she runs away, Carrie Fisher, who's playing her, is like, "Help me, Liz Lemon, you're my only hope." Yeah, so like you said, of course, what you may not remember is that this is also the episode in which Jack Donaghy basically does impressions of Tracy and his parent, his dad and mom.
I mean, that does sound funny, except that I'm not familiar with 30 Rock almost at all. So these are going almost completely over my head.
Well,
but I'm sure it was funny.
I will tell you, I recently, a few months ago, watched the whole thing again on Netflix. It still holds up. It's still a very funny show.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So, as you probably know, she is in the next Star Wars movie, and
Oh, really?
yeah, supposedly all the filming is finished. They're just in post-production now. And I have no idea, of course, what her role will be in that. I mean, it's impossible to say.
Do you know if she is supposed to be in the 9th one?
I don't know, but
Yeah.
I mean, you just saw the episode, the Rogue One, which didn't really have her in it, but they kind of like faked her face by putting her, like they had another actress that they did motion capture on.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that.
Yeah.
I feel like that would
CGI.
be weird to do.
Well, we're gonna have our Rogue One podcast, so we can talk about the CGI stuff. But it was nice to see her also in Rogue One, sort of. So.
Yeah. Well, I guess we won't get into specifics because that's its own level of spoilers.
Right.
Yeah. And,
oh, that's true.
Yeah. And anyway, I don't want to get into any more about that, but obviously you start getting people who get, I think obsessed with certain types of things. Obviously, as someone who was of a certain age, and people were like talking about her appearance and everything, and it was just kind of like, not great. But I mean, she had a difficult life in some sense, but she also had a very productive one.
Mm-hmm.
What
else did she? What else did she do? Did she do anything else before Star Wars? I mean, before Austin Powers, between Star Wars and Austin Powers?
Well, she mainly did a lot of writing, actually.
Right.
So, like, she was like a long stretch of time, but that she basically just had little cameo things here and there for many years, but didn't really have anything super specific. But she had a lot of writing credits too that she did that were uncredited.
Isn't that common for except for Harrison Ford? It's our little inside joke, Jeremy, which I won't mention. Yeah. But except for Harrison Ford, I think that was kind of the case with most of the actors in that they didn't really do much. I mean, Frank Oz, I guess, was still doing stuff, but that's a different story. I'm talking about the live action people. They didn't really have careers that took out anywhere close to how Harrison Ford's did. Because I'm thinking the other noteworthy actors were there is God, I'm forgetting his name. Whoever had the Millennium Falcon. I'm sorry, to the audience. We're not the biggest Star Wars heads, so I don't know everything.
Okay, so who do you want to know about from Millennium Falcon? I'll tell you.
The guy whose ship it originally was.
Lando Calrissian?
Yeah, so the Lando Calrissian, right. The
Yeah, you have to be a real Star Wars nerd to not.
What is he? Luke Harrison? That was his name? Harrison Walker?
So I know there was one black guy in the original trilogy. I don't remember his name. He just wasn't that memorable. Lando Calrissian, come on.
I actually thought for a little bit the actor is the same actor who did Apollo Creed. I thought that for a little while, and then I looked it up. I was like, oh no, it's a different person.
No, I'm just racist. Two black guys with short afros
with a mustache.
Why they must be the same person?
Well, sometimes you merge people together in your head.
Right. Well, it's just sort of
what's the name of the guy who played Obi-Wan Kenobi? Ben Kingsley.
Alec Guinness.
Alec Guinness, right?
Right. Oh, Ben Kingsley. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. They were basically the same person, except Ben Kingsley didn't have a beard. So, just saying.
Right. Right.
All right.
No, but Alec Guinness, did he do anything after that?
Oh, well, I mean, he was an acclaimed.
He was an acclaimed star before.
Star of the stage and screen. Did he do that much after? No.
What about really. The guy? The guy?
He did a lot of plays after.
What about the guy who played Darth Vader, actual Darth Vader, not James Earl Jones? What about that guy?
What, David Prowse?
Is that who it was?
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, I feel like, I know he's still alive. He's old, also. Hold on, let me see. After it, he was in not that much. He was in little things here and there, and then he was in a video game called Monopoly Star Wars. He was in Comic Book the Movie in 2004. Yeah, that's a big jump. Order of the Sith, he played Commander Prouse. I guess they just didn't nice to him.
Yeah, you made that point a little while ago, a couple days ago, that how Star Wars has dumb names some of the time. That's a good example of that. Well, actually, no, wait. The guy who played Sidious wasn't he Sidious in episodes 1 through 3?
Yeah, that's right.
That's kind of cool. I mean,
what you mean, the guy who plays Palpatine?
Palpatine, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you mean Ian McDiarmid? I may be saying it.
Or Dermot Mulroney. Dylan McDermott or Dermot Mulroney.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I recall, he did it as the Emperor in the first one, which I guess, was it The Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah, that's when he first appeared.
Yeah, he was, although he was originally uncredited, actually, in his first performance. Oh, no, he wasn't. It was, because that's right, I forgot about that. The first version of The Empire Strikes Back, they had someone else playing the Emperor, and then they superimposed, baboon eyes on him. That actually, that's one of the few good changes the special edition made, which is basically just having Ian McDiarmid come back and redo that line.
But then they redid it again, where they had Dylan McDermott come in as Darth Sidious.
Nobody's gonna understand that reference.
This wasn't even supposed to be a Star Wars podcast, but I will say, as an aside point, when I was talking to people recently, and I was at work recently, there were some people who didn't know. Maybe they were younger than I was. They didn't know about the special edition stuff, and I think not as many people know about that, because that was only a few years before Phantom Menace came out.
That's correct.
Because it came out, it was like 96 or something, or 97 when the special edition stuff came out.
I think even people who saw it then probably didn't realize, unless they were kind of into the nerdy stuff, about a lot of the changes that were made. I noticed a bunch of stuff just because we had watched them all relatively recently beforehand from Blockbuster or whatever. But I didn't notice all of them because I was just watching it once in the theater. There was no YouTube. Someone was comparing everything, and they hadn't re-released it out on video yet with the changes. So people hadn't had a chance to really pour over it, which didn't stop people from immediately starting to pour over it just by watching the movie again. But
a lot of it was that they also just made the special effects better. That was just the thing. They spruced it up a little bit. They updated some things. Yeah. But then there's that big thing, spoiler, where they have a scene of Han Solo with a Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah, remember? That one was pretty bad.
Yeah, it was.
Although the thing that people complain about is the whole thing where they made Greedo shoot in the scene. Because if you remember, remember the original Han Solo shoots Greedo, and that's it. And then they changed it to Greedo shoots, then Han Solo shoots. And then they changed it again in the Blu-ray release to they shoot at the same time.
Yeah.
And his head unnaturally moves out of the way so he can dodge it. Yeah, it was literally somebody took their head in a Photoshop and just moved it a little to the side and then moved it back.
It's amazing.
It's insane how awful that was considering how much money they spent on effects.
It's amazing how Star Wars in some sense is one of the greatest achievements ever and one of the worst achievements ever. It's it's so insane.
I don't know. I mean, the worst achievements.
Because it's so well. What I mean is it's so well known for some of that sort of fuckery of having these dumb decisions that they make, to try to improve it or update it, which just don't work.
All right.
Whatever.
Well, I feel like we wasted enough time on Star Wars, so let's get into our main
Rest
topic.
in peace, Carrie Fisher.
Yes.
Yeah, tribute to her.
Which is Westworld.
Right.
And let's just do the theme song. Westworld,
Westworld, Westworld.
So who did the theme song for
Ready to
Westworld?
save the day. There's that part at the very end.
Who is the music composer? Do you know? The answer is the same guy who did
Game of Thrones, right?
Yep, that's right. Ramin Djawadi, who's like German Iranian or something. And music's great. We can already start by saying that. You know, the theme song
and a great opening sequence too.
Yeah.
The stuff is cool with the skeleton hands playing the chords, and it works. That it's playing the actual chords, the actual notes that are the song's actual notes. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember when I saw, first started watching it, I recognized a character actress, Angela Sarafian, who's like Armenian, because she's done like character acting work, and she kind of did here also. She's the one who plays Clementine, which is a great name, of course, for that. But because I remember her from a lot of things, just like noticing her in several things, but there was like this really silly show. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was called Hot Sluts. That it was this like silly internet satire show with Alison Brie, and it was just like it was kind of like a silly show about strippers on the internet back in those days, where it was like I don't even remember which website it was. It was like one of these like Adam Films or something. And it was just like oh, who's this other girl? Because I'd only heard about it because I had already knew who Alison Brie was, and she was talking about being on some like weird. He's like, oh yeah, I used to do this show called Hot Sluts. Like what? So that's why I looked it up. But she didn't get that much attention from a lot of other movies. She's just been in a lot because she has a very interesting look. So that was one of the things that the episode, like in the beginning, was focusing on, was just like her very interesting facial features. Like she has very expressive eyes. So
you're saying in Westworld they focus on that.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's one of the interesting things about Westworld is sort of how they deal with the sort of problems of nudity versus not nudity. How do you do something in a way that's like tasteful, but all is it provocative? Is it not provocative? One thing that was pointed out, which I didn't realize the first time, which is that as Maeve, who's played by Tandy Newton, as her character becomes more and more self-aware, she wears more and more clothing. And she's shot, and in the scenes where she's nude, they show less and less of her. Over the course of it. And I was rewatching some of it, and I realized that's right, they were. Which is sort of, it's like one of those like subtle subconscious things where you're kind of like changing your perception of her without you thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, there is I do think part of it is partially the HBO factor of like, they always like to push the limits of like, how much violence and sex and nudity and stuff they have. And, I've already said my kind of complaints before about how I think they do too much of it gratuitously for no reason in Game of Thrones. I think, though there was a little bit of the gratuitousness in Westworld, I think they made it work pretty well, and it made sense the times it did. In fact, as you were kind of saying, I don't know if this is exactly what you were saying, but I feel like it ties to what you were saying. They even kind of played with that about like what's actually like nudity in a sexual way, and then if you're looking at these people as like specimens, or robots, is that really like is that actually like nudity? Is it actually a sexual thing? And actually, as we learn later on, I guess we should say spoilers at the beginning of this whole episode, but as we learn later on, obviously there's some scientists or some people working in the lab who like basically use the robots as their sex dolls, but also like not everyone does, obviously. I'm sure some people look at them as as there are these robots and they're not these artificial intelligence and they're not real, but it kind of plays with that whole thing of if they're just being used for that purpose, then it's just a fantasy, and that's what people are going for. It's not that they're going to see a robot, and they want it to seem real. So yeah, I mean, I think ultimately their stuff was well done, in terms of any of their pushing the limits sort of stuff, without it going into like horror, because that's the other extreme, without going into porn or horror.
Right.
But yeah. Okay. So I guess what we were going to talk about is like, how can we say whether or not the series, like, because I brought up before we started the podcast about, what can we say about how this was done differently than not just other HBO shows, but just some of the big, either big budget or heavily promoted TV shows on now that TV shows have become on par, perhaps even surpassed, motion pictures for or regular films for like attention in entertainment. Now that has happened and a lot of focus is on TV, how does it do things differently than these other grand shows or the iconic shows, and how does it do it well or maybe not as well? Does that make sense?
Right. So what do you think? Do you feel like it's just a continuation of the same kind of prestige stuff? Or do you feel like there's some things, that it just happens to be because there's nothing else on that's quite as mentally provoking?
What does that mean again when it's prestige stuff?
Prestige, where people are trying to make drama that's making trying to make thinky stuff and
right.
stuff that's gonna win awards and stuff.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, you mean it's something that might be like you could use the term Oscar baiting? Is that what you're saying? Something kind of like that.
So Emmy baiting or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think there was a little bit of that in the show. There's a little bit of it, I think, but ultimately, I think it succeeded. And I think one of, I'm trying to like put it together about what I think was good about it. So I mean, first of all, just the idea, it's a different take on artificial, on AI sci-fi. And I know it was based on a Michael Crichton novel, right? Mm-hmm. Originally, right? Wasn't it a Michael Crichton novel originally? And it was a movie at some point, right?
Well, I mean, the movie was written by him, if that's what you mean. By Michael Crichton.
Oh, so the movie was written by him. Whatever. I'm saying is, already existed before, but the concept of like, especially doing a whole show, I mean, it's kind of risky to have. It's a different way of having talking about doing the genre subgenre of sci-fi, the AI thing, in like the Wild West, because when I first saw it, the first couple episodes, or maybe even just the first episode, it's like, what? Like, I mean, it's kind of interesting, but you're like, why are they in the Wild West? Like, what does that have to do with any of this? Right. Oh. Why that time period?
Well, if you look at like the historical context, he came out with it in '73, right? Mm-hmm. And
the book, you mean?
No, it's not. It was not a book. It was just a movie that he wrote. So, I understand what you're saying, because he is a novelist also, and certainly, if you look, what I was going to say is, the movie was originally, it was about the future world of 1983. Which had,
right before 1984 that ends everything.
Right, well, there are three worlds: the Westworld, medieval world, and then, what was the other one? It was Roman world. Like Roman times. And basically, at the end of the movie, which is
Spoilers.
One of whom is played by Yul Brynner, who's like the gunslinger robot, they run amok and they kill a lot of humans, basically. And this has a lot of influence in pop culture, even though the movie was not particularly successful. It was somewhat successful. Like, he then kind of used a similar concept in Jurassic Park about things going amok.
Right.
And of course, if you look at that classic Itchy and Scratchy World episode of The Simpsons about robots coming amok. That's kind of
Right.
inspired by that also. So,
Right.
It's certainly
it's a trope. It's definitely
Yeah.
a trope of just even just the science experiment going amok. I mean, that's like canon sci-fi trope. But yeah.
Yes.
But yeah. So I'm saying is like, but as you said, actually, that's the thing that's interesting because they didn't. I think they did have maybe a couple mentions to there being other parks. Did they over the series? Or am I just imagining that?
No, they were oblique references, but they were there.
Right. And so that probably was a little bit of a nod, a little bit of a kind of Easter eggy nod to that stuff. But that's the thing, because they could have had a show would have been a little more straightforward, maybe more on the nose if they'd had the 3 different worlds but it's kind of ballsy, and I kind of applaud them to go into why is it the Wild West? But I think it really worked in a lot of ways, because first of all, the whole thing with the Wild West is that it's it's the Wild West, so I mean, like, you can get away with all your deepest, dark desires, whatever they are.
It's a dark romance,
Right.
I mean, if you look at like the way Westerns kind of evolved just in general, it's really interesting just to see how that went, because, you have like a lot of different Western movies that were around. Western, movies were just super common for a very long time.
Yes.
It was the movie, and there's a lot of reasons for that are, a lot, but
right.
Part of it happened just because of, that essentially there was this fake version of the West that became very popular in the early part of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
And
also the Western, even in the 1800s, I believe there were like, there were like short stories and maybe even comics at times, like short stories and stuff, and that's how it started.
Right. Yeah. They were essentially all lies.
Right.
And that, it was, certainly nothing was purely, safe everywhere, but the idea of these like crazy, raucous world, places where there was no law at all was just not true, because they were still, American cities. This wasn't like, out in the middle of the wilderness. This was where people lived. It was technically, where you could have an army or something, So that was something that happened. But
and there's also like just the propaganda element to it, of course, too.
Yeah. So that is part
sort
of
propaganda. Yeah.
But it was sort of one of the things that I want to get to, just like a little touch on here, is the whole Native American thing, because that was a big component of a lot of the old classic westerns. Now, not all of them. Like, for example, if you look at some of the later stuff with like Clint Eastwood that he did, that was a lot more about good and bad people.
Well, of course, because that was sort of, you could say, really the end. That was like towards the end of the Western genre, where that you'll only occasionally have things after that, such as the iconic film Wild Wild West.
Well, I mean, Unforgiven is is correctly lauded as one of those just amazing.
Yeah.
movies.
Well, that was like in some sense you could say that was like the depth of it in a graceful way. I mean, I would still include Django Unchained and Hateful Eight, and because you can always include Tarantino with stuff he does, making it truly like actually Kill Bill, the second one was also pretty much a Western for most of it. But besides Tarantino, there isn't. I mean, he's reviving a genre for his film. It's not like
that's his shtick. That's what he does.
Right. Exactly. So it's not so.
Right. So thinking about this kind of romance, that's it. You can kind of see how you can kind of get caught up in this concept, because you're sort of looking at a different world. So we can see like there was a context that they did in the 70s, which had its own context. Nowadays, in the world that we live in, this show, Westworld, is sort of projecting a future from where we are now, you would think. I mean, they never really said otherwise, so the assumption is it's sometime in our future. We don't know exactly when.
Right.
So why?
And they do it convincingly enough. They do it convincingly enough to show how technology could evolve to where it is in the show.
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting thing because they were, if you remember some of the later episodes, they kind of show some of the older stuff from like 20 or 30 years ago that where they was still advanced but like less advanced.
Right.
And I like
when he's
a little touch too.
Yeah, well that was great when he's like, with the Anthony Hopkins with Ford. That was like a nice little touch too, that he kind of liked being around some of the older robots. Remember, he was talking that one guy who's just like he has a drink with, who like really just has canned responses, and he's like listening to his story, and he's like creaking like an old robot, and the only thing he says after the story is like, man, that's one boondoggle of a story. I'll drink to that.
A boondoggle.
Whatever he says.
Well, I'll drink to that. That sounds about right. I feel like maybe the boondoggle is a particularly Western slang.
Horse diggly.
All right. Just because you're giving it a Western accent doesn't mean...
Moon pie. What a time to be alive.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Well, actually, that's true because it was about the future.
It was about the future.
It worked. I'm in the future.
Although my
pie.
favorite joke about that is because it's like over like the course of like a week or two, and he comes out to Apu. He's like, Apu, time is ravaging your once youthful looks.
Nice. Okay, so getting back to Westworld. I mean, yeah, like the foreseeable future, and actually a good thing too when you're mentioning the Western genre thing is actually it's a perfect way to sort of reintroduce the Western genre or update it because it's more meta now, and actually you can play on it, but without it just being a parody. So it's like there's a parody type element to it because it's showing how ridiculous it is and how ridiculous the fantasy of the Western stuff is, literally. So it's kind of like the whole
that it
thing
is artificial on its face.
Right. And you have these people playing these roles and repeating these roles, and they're kind of stuck in it. I mean, that's kind of one of the themes in there, just them being stuck in these roles, or how do they break out of it, and the romance or whatever that people want to see. But also, it is pretty. I mean, it's pretty realistic that probably this would be a very popular place. If people could do that.
It's super expensive.
Yes, yeah. So it's that was good. Okay, so I guess let's talk about unless you had something else to say, I guess let's talk about what are some of our opinions are. I mean, we're going to talk about the yeah. Okay. So the basic point we were trying to say is like, how does it compare with the other either big budget or leading shows that are out now? And I don't think it's the best or maybe even in the top 4 of some of the stuff that's come out over the past 2 to 5 years, but maybe in the top 10. And I think it's interesting. I really enjoyed it. I think it had
as well.
It's expansive. It has a unique take on things. It deals, I think, with artificial intelligence in a good way. I would say in a fresh way, but I'm sure there have been, at least short stories and novels that have dealt with this version of thinking about artificial intelligence. But it being in a show is cool. And it felt real and obviously, and we've talked about this, obviously they were able to get some really terrific actors. I mean, especially like Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins, not Popkins.
Yeah.
Anthony Hopkins.
Mr. Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins, another inside joke no one's going to get. But
if you're Peter Serafinovich's biggest fan, you'll get it.
But you'll get it. But that's us.
Anthony Hopkins is just, remember what we were talking about before? How do we think about just actors in general? Because you could say this guy is one of the best actors ever. I mean, thing is, like, you can look at all sorts of people like that. Tom Hanks is great. James Earl Jones is great. These are all great actors. Anthony Hopkins is also. But if you want to pick, like, is there a specific performance that's one of the best of all time. I
Right.
do think you can pick, The Silence of the Lambs as one of them.
Mm-hmm. And
It's a pretty phenomenal role that he did.
And he's terrific in this. I mean, he really ups the level of the show with his performance. I mean, Ed Harris is pretty much there with him. I don't think it's not that Ed Harris could do his own spin on. I mean, I think Anthony Hopkins was the perfect for the role of Ford. But like, if Ed Harris had that role, he could carry it too. You know what I mean? I mean, he could be the lead, in it too. But the thing is Anthony Hopkins really just raised the bar of the entire show. And then Jeffrey Wright, of course. Jeffrey Wright's fantastic. I mean, he's so good. And for someone who kind of is kind of typecast, in a certain sense, he kind of is typecast in roles. He nails it every time. He's like kind of typecasted.
Let me tell you my favorite parts that he did. There's two things that jump out to me. One is when he is starting to fall apart. When he's like, no, I can't be. My son, I can't be. And he's like having the existential crisis, and he says, calm down, Bernard. And then he just shuts off. And
yeah.
And I heard there were some interviews with like Jonathan Nolan, who's one of the guys, and it's like some of the directors were saying that for some of the actors, they actually did use CGI to make them freeze artificially. Mm-hmm. But with Jeffrey Wright, they didn't have to.
Of course, I'm not surprised. Yeah.
And he said it was actually unsettling.
Yeah, no,
how
it looked
he
like
could do it.
He was. I mean, he's phenomenal, and he's so good. That's why he's such a good team with Anthony Hopkins. Like they just, Okay, you said there was another part that was your favorite with him?
It's after that where he's getting really angry at Ford, where and he just like flips over this chair in this like thing of anger, and it's like, oh, you've never really seen him angry before. Like he has like this energy that's right there. Mm-hmm. And it's it's great. I know. Here's something which I don't know if you know this or not. Robert Ford is actually a reference to something.
Okay.
Robert Ford, it was a legendary outlaw in the West who is known for killing Jesse James to collect the award on his head.
Okay.
And there was a movie that was made out of it a few years ago, which was like the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, in which Robert Ford is played by Casey Affleck. Mm-hmm. And he got a nomination for an Oscar for that.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, so it's just kind of interesting in that I don't know if that's like just a reference that they just sort of threw in there, or if it actually means something.
Or if that has a deeper meaning. I mean, it could. I mean, he's.
I mean, it can't be a coincidence. He's a Western outlaw. There's no way.
Also, I mean, if you think about it, it's like Robert Ford in some sense masters the West. If you can kill the biggest outlaw, the most famous outlaw, then you mastered it. And that's the thing. I mean, clearly
Ford
the
biggest outlaw.
Jesse James is one of the biggest ones.
Oh, I thought you were talking about in Westworld, the series.
Well, then what I'll say in Westworld is just he's the master of everything. I mean, no one outsmarts him.
Right. So he basically arranges the assassination of himself.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And the only person who could come close to outsmarting him, was Bernard. That was the thing. When Bernard was Bernard. That was a great moment with Jeffrey Wright too, of when he when he tells Dolores like that he's gonna have to like kill himself or something, or that Dolores is gonna have to kill him. He gets in this like state where he's like possessed. He's like, so you're gonna have to, but he's so convincing with it. It's a hard thing to do, but yeah. So I mean, clearly Ford was just like a master of all of it, and he could. And no one was ahead of him or outsmarting him. Like, I don't think there was even one moment where he was surprised, like, where anyone like outdid him. Like, there was some stuff about like, there are some people he might not want to kill. Like it seemed like he didn't originally want to kill the Danish woman. What was her name in it?
Wait, are you talking about Teresa?
Yes. So
Yeah.
remember, it seemed like he didn't particularly want to, and I kind of credit that video that broke down that scene, talking about Anthony Hopkins' performance in that, where it showed that one of his things, he had like a face of like regret or like sadness for a second.
The nerd writer YouTube
right.
video.
Well, because it kind of pointed out that there was actually a point where she said something where he was like, he kind of felt bad that he's like, I guess I'm gonna have to kill her too.
Yeah.
But besides that, it's not like anyone could get ahead of it. It was so clear the woman from, what was the name of the company? I forgot what it was called.
Which one?
The one that ran it, or that bought out Westworld.
Oh, Delos.
Yeah, clearly the woman who was like the executive from it, clearly she, it was clear she was not going to be able to outsmart. It was just
Are you talking about the new person?
Yeah.
You're talking about the black actress.
Yeah.
Who is Tessa Thompson? She played
right.
Charlotte Hale.
Yeah. No, it was clear from the jump that she wasn't going to be able to outsmart she clearly is good at outsmarting people, but she clearly was not going to be able to outsmart Ford. But yeah, I'm sort of going off on a tangent. But just for all those elements, the fact that it was an interesting way of going about, first of all, just AI in general. They had some good things they explored there. I cared about the characters, definitely, at least a number of them, even the AI characters. Like, right, that was part of the thing. You cared about them. You cared about their pain. You cared about their relationships. You even cared, and that's also what it was playing with. I mean, the whole thing with Bernard's son, they with that whole thing, like, you actually kind of cared about that, and having that memory, so they did a good job with that, and then also just the performances in general, and then the special effects and how they did that. I think overall it is in perhaps the top 10, with some of these shows, or top 15. I like other things better, but I definitely dug this one, and I thought it was ballsy too for them to go down this route. It's not a sure thing.
No, that's true. It was a very expensive show as well. But so let's just run through the cast here for a second. Just talk about each character in brief. So first there is the main character. I think you could argue Dolores, played by Evan Rachel Wood.
Uh-huh.
And I think that she's great.
She is, definitely.
And it's kind of anytime you have to play a fake person, it's kind of like it's tricky. It's sort of like it's the classic problem. Like, how do you act well? How do you act like an actor is supposed to be, a good actor? I can give you an example of a bad example. There was on Lifetime had this thing called the Full House Unauthorized show story or something, where it kind of ostensibly told the real life story of how Full House. And at one point, the actress who's coming in to play DJ is coming in to audition. And I don't want to be mean, but she does a bad job in this made-for-TV movie.
Yeah.
So they have a thing where they basically.
Wait, it's like a mockumentary or something?
No, it's not really. I mean, I think they might pretend it is, but it's just sort of a poorly made, thing. But they do it because they're trying to get eyes, and it worked. They got a little bit of attention, but it's not particularly good.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, they had in this little thing, like, oh, we're really gonna have this other actress. She's great, and then Candace Cameron, the girl who's playing her. And by the way, Candace Cameron, the actual actress, is much better than this girl who was playing her. But
right.
She's like, all right, Mom, what am I gonna do? What if they don't like me? Well, you just gotta wow him, sweetheart. And so basically, she goes in, and now does she? You didn't see La La Land, right?
No.
All right. Well, one of the things that happens there is Emma Stone is playing an actress, and I think you're supposed to think she's good, and that she can do because Emma Stone is an amazing actress.
Right.
But in the case of this show, basically what they do instead is they sort of cut. you don't see her talking, but you see like the executives laughing it up but it's like
that's a cheap trick right there. Yeah. That's just laziness and cheap. And man, is that a cheap? That's such a cop out. Wow.
Yeah. Right. So Evan Rachel, if you look at like the people who got nominations for this, some people did, some people didn't. Like for example, Golden Globes, which are always kind of, who knows what the hell's going on with them type of thing. They actually did recognize, to a certain extent, they recognized Evan Rachel Wood and Tandy Newton for Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress.
Mm-hmm.
However, what they didn't do was anyone else from the show.
They didn't even do Anthony Hopkins. That's crazy. Unless like they're. I mean, as Anthony Hopkins, has he won an Oscar?
Oh yeah, I just told you he won for Silence.
And he won for that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, let's hope he gets nominated for an Emmy. I mean, I guess you could have that point of view. It's like, oh, he's had enough already. But honestly, that's ridiculous. Like his performance deserves at least an Emmy nomination.
I feel
so
like
for him,
he must. I mean, I don't know.
He's
but
got to. What is anyone thinking if they're gonna do any male actor from the show at all?
Right. Well, I mean, they
should do him. I mean, Jeffrey Wright too. I mean,
is Jeffrey Wright like Best Supporting or Best Actor? Well, I don't know.
It's hard to say.
All right, but let me just give you a little. This is a slight tangent, but let's just so you know. The people that were nominated for Golden Globes again. This is Golden Globes, so it's a little wonky. Was Rami Malek,
just like
Robot.
Just like in that episode of The Simpsons with Sideshow Bob, where they're like, when they're trying to get rid of his Oscars, right? He's like, sorry, you can't hold on to it. You can't. No Oscars.
All awards are
no
contraband.
No Emmys, no Oscars, no Tonys, not even a Golden Globe.
Yeah, right. So here are the nominees that happened. Rami Malek for Mr. Robot, Bob Odenkirk for Better Call Saul, Matthew Rhys for The Americans, and whatever, they are all deserving, obviously. Lee Schreiber for Ray Donovan, which is like, yeah, he was good, but come on, he wasn't as good as Anthony Hopkins. And Billy Bob Thornton for Goliath. It's like, what? No.
Yeah, you're definitely not happy about that. Yeah.
Listen, he was good. If they had done it for like Fargo, which maybe they did, I don't remember. That would be fine because he was good in that. But also, I do like Bob Odenkirk, but I would pick out him and Liev Schreiber and Billy Bob Thornton for any of them for Jeffrey Wright and Anthony Hopkins for sure. I mean, Matthew Rice was pretty great, and so was Rami Malek.
Matthew Rice is always great.
Right now.
And then Rami Malek, what Rami Malek does for the role, you know what I mean, the sacrifice, you know what I mean, the way he gets into it is just great. But yeah.
So I don't know for sure how it's going to work with like the supporting or not, because this is all kind of like they do it weirdly. But their supporting nominees are Sterling K. Brown, who was from O.J. Simpson, and John Travolta from People O.J. Simpson.
Supporting?
Yeah.
That makes sense. He was supporting in it.
You know, it does. There was
an ensemble to it, but he was, yeah.
We're picking the best performances. Courtney B. Vance, who did Johnny Cochran, is leading for that category.
Yeah. And he was amazing. Yeah.
John Lithgow for The Crown, which he was really good at. Christian Slater for Mr. Robot, and Hugh Laurie for The Night Manager. And that's just because they love Hugh Laurie. But
wait. That doesn't make sense because People versus OJ was 2015.
It was this year. It was this year.
But didn't People versus OJ it win some Emmys?
It did because the Emmys they're in a different time of the year. They are
right. But how did it coincide with John Lithgow with The Crown? I thought that came after the Emmys.
Because the Golden Globes they do it for the whole year.
Oh, you're talking about the Golden Globes right now. Okay.
Yeah, the Emmys is a little bit different. So the Emmys happened before Westworld started.
Right.
So Westworld will be considered next year
Mm-hmm.
for the Emmys.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point of all these people is like, none of these are bad performances, but I mean, how could you ignore really ignore Anthony Hopkins, and also how can you ignore Jeffrey Wright? It's just like,
Yeah.
it just shows like how the Golden Globes are just stupid. So, all right, so but let's get back into one of the people who was nominated, which is Tandy Newton, who played Maeve.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she did a great job, and she is a great actress.
Yeah.
I wouldn't blame this when I'm gonna say necessarily on her performance. But I think maybe the second half or the last third, I'd say that the last third of her, or maybe last third or fourth of the season where she was in, it was kind of all the same. I felt like there was a little bit of change, but I felt like it was like she was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna kill all of you men. I thought you were gods, but you stinking, disgusting, bearded, nerdy men.
Oh, I like that line. Yeah.
No. But I felt like it got a little bit into that role of she's this like femme fatale thing that became a little too like. It wasn't actually cartoonish, like, because I'm being kind of. It's kind of like when you're criticizing, an all-star professional sports player for like messing up something. Not that she messed up anything, but do you know what I'm saying? Though it's just like I felt like Dolores' character kept up with the dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Maeve had a big dramatic change that was significant and great, and she and the actress handled it really, really well. I'm just saying once she had that shift and realized stuff, those are the parts where it just became kind of this like action movie thing, and she was this like, as I said, femme fatale.
Right. So, okay. Then we also have James Marsden, who played Teddy.
Mm-hmm.
And
he was really good.
He was really good. Mm-hmm. It's nice to see James Marsden given something that can be good at. I mean, there's this, there's Enchanted. There is not X-Men, obviously.
No, I mean it's cool. He's he does a really good job, and he shows some depth, and that's also the really good thing about him is that he's got that look where he looks like the all-American cowboy who's going to save the day. And he goes through his like existential crisis,
right.
Which I think he pulled off well.
Yeah, that was cool. I mean, I liked how like we were tricked in like the first episode or two to think that he was a guest, but it turns out he was also a host, which is kind of a little funny. And I told you like when I rewatched it how it was like, oh okay,
yeah,
it was like yeah, but so he was good. What did you think of Armistice, the evil female host?
she was good.
She's still alive, She just cut off her arm.
Yeah,
so,
no, she's good, and I was complaining about those things with Maeve with the femme fatale. I think part of it is that she was changing, and the kind of like it just stayed the same. But with this character, I guess what I liked with the person you just mentioned is that she had only really one type of character to play, but she sold it really well.
Yeah, she was, and like in that final episode where she's gonna be biting that guy's finger. It was like, that was like where she gave like him like the I'm gonna bite your thumb off.
I'm gonna do it. Don't you know?
And it takes some talent to be really terrifying while naked. So
yeah, no, good. She pulled it off. She definitely pulled it off.
Yeah.
And she looked and like when she was like in the cowboy thing, like she just played this like vicious character.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. What about the other Hemsworth, Luke Hemsworth, who played Ashley Stubbs? He didn't have that much to do. So the real question is, do you think he's still alive?
Oh. I don't know. Maybe he becomes a host.
I mean, you don't forget, any character can come back as a host, technically speaking. Although I don't think that's going to happen for Ford. But, that being said, there is sort of the classic thing. It happened with Game of Thrones, even in the books, where if you don't see them, you don't see the body, don't assume they're dead, type of thing. It doesn't mean they're not necessarily dead, but remember the whole thing, spoilers for Game of Thrones, I said after everything that happened with, like, Arya and everything, I don't believe that Theon is really dead, and you said, no, he's dead, and I was right.
Yeah, then Reek.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
I mean,
It's
I'm
true.
not getting into the show, because the show is, they like to play tricks on you, even more so than George R. Martin did, but so I don't know. I mean, it would be kind of like a boring death in a sense, because he never really did anything interesting.
I mean, he's not the most interesting character.
Right.
I mean, the performance is fine. I see why he's necessary in there.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like, they needed one guy who's like the most competent idiot, I guess. Not that he was an idiot, but you know what I mean. Like he was, not an idiot, but you know what I mean. Like he doesn't like question a lot. He wasn't really trying to dig deeper into it, but he
wasn't an idiot.
Right.
Like, he had the gun ready to go, but he didn't. I mean, essentially, what he didn't do was take into account that Ford would be sabotaging the system to make it impossible for him to do anything.
Right.
There's nothing you can do about that.
He's a chess piece, not a player. That's I guess kind of my point. And not even a very big piece. He's not a pawn, but he's a knight. I guess.
A schnook. Right.
He's a schnook. What a schnook!
Speaking about other chess pieces, what did you think of Teresa?
I really liked her performance. She had that very subtle. She really nailed that very subtle and nuanced performance. Like really well. And when people can do that, then when they actually go crazy, it just shows how much control they have over their like craft, you could say, or what they do. Because when she did a great job at dying. I mean, really. Oh, yeah.
It was great because it was the betrayal in like several levels. It was which was great,
it was like the horror. It was the horror of it, of just like she knows what's going on and the shock, and then the betrayal thing. And she also, she did, as I said, with the subtle stuff, which also Jeffrey Wright and of course Anthony Hopkins are great at. With the subtle work, like also her face and how she when she needed to like pause, she needs to like end the relationship with Bernard. She like had a look where, I mean, she did it just so well of like, she was determined that she was gonna, she was about business and all that, but you could still see like the hurt just in her eyes. You know what I mean? Yeah. That she didn't want to do it. So,
that's like a tricky thing, from an acting perspective. I mean, as you know, trying to emote with your eyes is hard.
It takes a skilled actor. I mean, a very skilled actor to do. Also, her like reaction. Remember, to seeing the papers. The sketch when she finds out that Bernard is a host.
That was great.
She had an amazing reaction to that.
Especially because of his response of, "No, I don't see anything.
This doesn't look like anything." Yeah, that whole thing.
Anything. Yeah. So, she was great. The guy who played Lee Sizemore, I feel like that was just one of those things. Like he was another pawn.
Wait, which one was that?
He was like the guy who was like the narrative guy who was like pissing on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, he just seems like
the role.
He's just another pawn for other people.
He's clearly a pawn for other people, and then it was good that they dealt with him early on in the series. Like, I mean, he's no threat at all to Ford, and Ford just, even though Ford's whole thing wasn't what the lie he said about why Sizemore's thing didn't work, but he just made like quick work of him just being like no, like what do you? Very clearly a pawn, and very clearly wanted to just be Ford without understanding Ford.
Right. Okay. Well, so what do you think about Hector, the gang leader that helps them escape?
He was all right. He's all right. I mean, he sold it well. I part of the thing I didn't like about the finale is, I mean, I thought the action chase thing was too long. Like it was just this long action thing that just was, I think, unnecessarily long. And he was sort of like a part of that. But he wasn't. I don't have any real complaints about him.
Right. All right. I guess so. Well, what do you think of Elsie?
Who was that again?
She was like the assistant to Bernard, and then it seems like he kills her. At least that's the implication we're getting. Although again, I don't know, she might not be. It's again, I kind of hope she isn't dead.
Right. She was an interesting character. She had an interesting. She clearly was an interesting person, and the actress played her well. Yeah, I liked. Yeah, I liked her.
Yeah. So. I like.
He asked me about the assistants, like the technicians, the ones who like set.
Yeah, what do you think of those guys? Felix and Sylvester.
Felix was the guy actually lets her go, like the Asian guy, right?
Yeah, Felix was the Asian guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he did a better job than the other guy. Not the other guy did a bad job, but I think his character was good, and it was good how it was like. At the end of the day, it was kind of like he actually really wanted to see what would happen and wanted to release them.
Well,
you know what I mean? That was kind of what it seemed like.
Yeah, it seemed like he had kind of decided that he thought it was immoral keeping those people there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and clearly Maeve picked up on that, and they all did that. That he was, but he did a good job of doing that while still being shocked and freaked out by the whole.
Well, yes.
So.
Well, understandably, too.
Yes, of course. That's got to be very terrifying. and they capture that well. They should capture how terrifying it is for these things to suddenly come alive and,
Yeah. Whoops.
I mean, that is a trope, obviously, in AI things, stories of that they come alive at some point.
Yeah. Felix! You did it again, kid.
Yeah.
You let out the robots. The rivets.
The rivets.
All right. Well, what do you think of Jimmy Simpson?
Who was that again?
He played William.
Is he the guy who's in House of Cards?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, he did well. I mean, he's got that kind of dark. Part of it, maybe my impression is colored by his character on House of Cards, but he's got kind of that dark thing to him that he does well. So when he does stuff that's lighter, not that he's not convincing, it's just that it's got a little bit of, I don't want to say creepy aura that it's, but it's a little like he's got this unsettling aura to him. But it's kind of interesting. So it's got its own flair to it. But I will say my least favorite. Maybe this is the next one you're gonna do. My least favorite performance definitely was his like soon to be brother-in-law or whoever. That was definitely the most hammy and
Logan?
And yeah, that was. I think that was the weaker point of the show, both with the writing and possibly the acting. I mean, I don't know if it had been. I don't know which one was the weaker part of that. Maybe if he had been given a better character, he would have portrayed it differently, step up to it, or maybe it was just that he wasn't really able to channel really anything but kind of just being this bro. I mean, really, that's what he was. He was this business bro, who belongs like one of the stereotypical business bros in Mr. Robot. So that's where he should have been.
He belongs in a museum. I get it.
Do you agree with me though with that character? I don't think it didn't work, but it was a little too bro-ish. He was just so obvious. And of course he becomes a Confederate soldier. Oh, to show how fucking evil he is. You know what I mean? Like I think that imagery. No, do you know what I mean? Like I mean that imagery and the symbolism of like the Confederate and Union stuff. I think I thought that was an interesting thing to do. But it was just so obvious. Of course, he's gonna. I'm a Confederate, yeah. You show how evil I am. Like that's literally what he is. So.
Well, I mean, but the Confederates there though, not quite the same Confederates.
But the implication, implications of course he's going to. That's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, but they're not the same as all the other ones. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's
like you know how Cartman's always going to do everything that's awful in the show, and he's going to be drawn to anything that's sexist, racist, hateful, mean, violent, horrible, selfish, and stuff. I mean, obviously, I love South Park and I love Cartman, but what I'm saying is that's kind of like what they did with this guy, except he didn't have Cartman's charm, to him or hilariousness. It was a little too much of a stereotype for me. But again, the level of the other actors was so high that I can't totally fault him. So.
Right, well, yeah, I mean, no. But I guess I never asked you, what did you think of Clementine?
I like that. She did a good job at the pausing. Remember, like, when she would pause as a robot, she was very convincing with that. I mean, definitely, Evan Rachel Wood was, convincing with it. But I thought the girl, what's her name again? The one who played
Angela Sarafian.
Sarafian, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and she played the part well, and she and Tandy, is that her name? The actress?
Yeah.
They had a good dynamic with each other. Even though it wasn't there all the time, they had a really cool relationship and dynamic going on between each other that I really enjoyed.
Right, well that's why I liked it, when they had the whole replacing her and she's like, this ain't Clementine.
Wait, who said that?
Well, he may not have said that.
Some guy walked in, he's like, that ain't Clementine.
Yeah, that's what she said. That's what Nate said. She put like one hand on each hip, and she's like, "Listen, y'all."
Listen, you all people.
I'm sorry, you're right. He said, "Listen, y'all." Just like it's like that British way. It's like she can't. She just simply cannot put those two words without like separating them by a pause, because it's like, all right, Tanty, I want you to say y'all. You all no. Y'all. You all no. You
up
all,
and at
no.
them. Up and at them. Up and at them.
Yeah, it's closer. So let's move on a little bit here. So, what did you think about the way the structure was? It seemed like a lot of it was intended to kind of like mess with you, right?
Uh-huh.
So they were, because from the very beginning they're showing you different timelines, and
right.
It only becomes clearer later that it was all different timelines. So do you think that was like a good thing? Like, do you think it was just a twist for twist's sake? Do you feel like it actually made sense in a way that like because it didn't like everything was really kind of explained, at least from that side. There are still questions, but at least the different timelines, we know what they all are.
Yeah, I mean I thought it wasn't the biggest twist. They did it really well. When you find out Bernard is a host, that was done exceptionally well. That was one of the best twists I've ever seen. That I totally didn't see coming. The twist with the timelines, I didn't see it coming, but I was like, okay, that works. And then it explained the Ed Harris character, Man in Black or whoever. That explained him well, and it explained Dolores too. I didn't dislike it. In fact, I liked it, but I wasn't the biggest fan of the finale. I don't think it didn't do its job. I just think there was like some kind of excessive stuff. Like there was some drag. It was like kind of, and a little bit of the back and forth of Bernard like dying and then he comes back and all that stuff. Not that he shouldn't come back, but it's like, there's a little bit of this back and forth stuff going on that I felt also with Dolores, where she was just constantly that word state. I don't know what's going on, and it was that like that.
Now you sound like that was a little. Well, that was actually pretty good, actually. I was gonna say, at first I was gonna decry it as like a bad impression, but then I was like, no, actually. So that's actually
yeah. Well, I mean, she's as we said, Evan Rachel Wood is terrific in it. But I think that lasted. It wasn't her fault, but I'm saying I think that kind of dragged out kind of in the way, spoiler for Orange is the New Black, season 3, I think, the end of season 3, where they're all in that lake or whatever, and that final scene. I felt like that went on for like 20 minutes, and it could have been like 5, maybe 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
so I felt.
Are we talking about the season finale of Orange is the New Black?
Of that season,
where they were going for a swim? For like 3 hours.
Yeah, it was like a 3-hour swim. It was like, that's nice. Like, I hope, like, it's nice that they got, I guess, a 3-hour swim.
Right, and then it was just a little weird that they just filmed it and then just put it on the screen.
They just filmed them having a swim. Like, I feel like there was conversations like, man, it sure is great to swim. Yeah, it sure is. You gonna go swimming? Maybe I will in a bit. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm thinking about it too. Maybe I'll just dip my toes in for a bit. That's what I feel like was going on.
I mean, it was a little weird when, like, everyone moved off camera and you just heard, like, the splashing sounds for, like, 40 minutes, but yeah.
What's that? So what I'm saying is, this kind of, it wasn't totally like that, but it was like a little bit too much drag of just like Dolores, freaking out without moving it so much forward. It didn't kill it, and like, so I felt like the season finale could have been like 15 to 20 minutes shorter. So also with like the big shootouts that were going on, too, within the facility. Not that it shouldn't happen. It's just, again, I felt like that was a little dragged out. That kind of, because the show is, it was very good at the slow build of all the action and violence and all sorts of stuff going, and it's kind of a mind trip. And yeah, there is some of the action going on there, which does need to be there. It makes sense for it to be there, but it was just like, by that point, I think it was too much. So just barely too much. But just like with Dolores in the I've said my point like 5,000 times. Just dragged on a little bit with Dolores stuff, but the changing time thing I think worked. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because you didn't look at the internet with any of this kind of crap, and I did. Mm-hmm. So basically, not spoilers, but for the most part, every twist I saw coming because I'd heard so many like theories, some of which were wrong, but some of which, like, when I went back and rewatched them, like, oh no, yeah, that's definitely what's happening. Mm-hmm. Like Bernard being Arnold, I kind of like, I saw that.
Yeah.
That the Men in Black and William were the same. I saw that too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But what I didn't see coming was that Ford was actually on Arnold's side, and that the death of his friend had changed him.
Yeah, that was good too. That's a real skill of the show too, to sort of take Ford from being first this kind of like mysterious genius who's like just knows truly what people want, you know what I mean? But in maybe somewhat a benevolent way, to kind of this evil genius, right. To kind of like, he's not an evil genius necessarily. I mean, he does kill all those people in the end.
Yeah, but he's doing it for a very specific reason, which is he's thinking, I'm going to be dead anyway. It's like, who else? Who cares? I mean, other people, if they have to die too to get to where I need to go, well, that's what has to happen. Hell, if I'm sacrificing myself, I'm certainly not going to have, qualms. Maybe he does have qualms, like he feels bad, but he's still going to do it.
I mean, do all these people deserve to die? I mean, I'm not convinced they were so. I mean,
no. When I say deserve, I don't mean literally deserve. I mean from their impediments to getting the future that he wants, which is this freedom.
Yeah, what is that, by the way? Maybe we should talk about that. Yeah, what is that? What is his goal? I actually wasn't very clear about that.
He wants Dolores to break out, to be sentient.
Right.
To be really sentient, and the only way to do that is with pain.
Right. But what's his ultimate purpose for doing this anyway in the first place? Like, why does he want
Arnold is the one who said, "Hey, maybe we should let these people free," but
because
because he said, no, they're essentially sentient. They're like beings. We shouldn't enslave them.
Oh, saying just the moral thing of just letting them go, but
Right.
not necessarily
So
that's going to benefit humanity.
Arnold tried to get it to happen by forcing Dolores to kill him. That didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, he realized. How did Ford realize? He realized the humanity of himself by the pain he felt by the loss of his friend, and he realized that is how these people, these hosts can evolve by thinking of memories, the pain.
Yeah.
That is why. That's the whole. If you're talking about the reveries thing from the very beginning, Dolores kept remembering her past, the painful past. That was what kept her being able to evolve. Same thing that happened for Maeve. She was remembering like the loss of her daughter, the past life, and that was another like trying. We still don't know exactly what was going on with him, except
right.
It seemed like if he was involved with her, which he probably was, it seemed like what Bernard was saying is like, well, it seems like the plan is for you to leave the park and go back to the mainland. And it's like, wait, what is the plan there? What is he doing? Maybe he was actually like trying to get her out because he's like, okay, Dolores shoots me. Well, she's not going to really. It's probably she's not going to be able to escape. So let me try to have like essentially two things happening at the same time. Essentially have like a bunch of crap going on so that Maeve can escape, and then Dolores will shoot me, so that I'll have like there'll be two options. So it's sort of an interesting. That's my interpretation of that plan, because we never really know exactly who was involved with Maeve, other than it was somebody.
Yeah. I mean, there was the thing of what was the name of the man in black again? What was his name? William. There was the thing where at one point William does come, and I think doesn't he kill her daughter in one of the simulations that kills her? There was once where he does, but also there's clearly just some stuff of like, there's just like the tribe or whatever, like killing, what's called whatever like they were getting attacked by some Native American or American Indian like raiding party or something like that.
Yeah.
Wasn't that how it was? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So okay. I feel like in general, I wasn't sure because I liked a lot of these twist things, but I was always like wondering like, how would someone who isn't involved with all this stuff? And I'm glad that you did appreciate a lot of these twists without and the thing is the fact that I kind of anticipated but it still worked pretty well for me, I think is a sign of the strength of how it's done, and that it feels earned. So I want to move on a little bit here, which is to this like when we're looking into the the future of the show. I mean, so do you think like what's the next thing? Are they going to just like start from the next place? Is that what you want to see?
It's very up in the air.
Do you want to see a time jump? Do you want to see him jump to like a samurai world? I mean, I kind of want to see
that's a good
world.
Point.
I want to see like like what happens in samurai world if there is such a thing.
Well, actually, that's an interesting thing because the term is Westworld, but they can probably play with that in the sense of like what does that mean, a Westworld? Because there is that sort of undertone of like frontierism and like colonialism. The fact, or just stuff in America, the fact that they had, like Confederate army and Union and they had like Native Americans and they had and it was kind of like had that whole thing about business. That whole like overtone of business and sort of capitalism stuff. Like there was a little bit of that sort of commentary there. It wasn't hitting you over the head with it, but it was a little bit of that sort of like being cold and heartless for the sake of, for the sake of the enjoyment of whoever can pay or, and the whole conquest thing. That's there. So, if they do something in the East worlds, you know what I mean, or whatever, samurai, or something else like that could connect with it. I think I didn't even think about that. They might just do a different park. The thing I was interested in is like, are they going to show the outside world at all? And that's I could see why maybe in the entire show they never do, and sort of what it is. You just have to build it up in your mind. I could see that working. That could definitely work. I could also see them doing stuff in that actual world at the time. It's just there is a risk of it getting too dumb, somehow, if they do that.
They put themselves like on a pretty strong path already, and if Anthony Hopkins doesn't come back, which I assume he won't be, they are kind of.
Oh wait, unless he comes back as a host.
I understand. I just don't think they would. I feel like that's a bit robbing of what happens. But I think, Jeffrey Wright, he's not dead, so he can come back. We didn't see Harris die, so he can come back as well.
Right.
But the fact that they don't have Anthony Hopkins is just there's nothing going around it. It just can't be as good just because he won't be there. So
I really do not know at all what they're gonna do because it's a self-contained. It could be a self-contained thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
It's funny, like if they did like the the samurai thing, I kind of wonder about like who is is there really like a great like fantastic Japanese actor?
The guy from Rogue One. Is he Japanese? Oh crap.
He's Chinese, but
damn it. Sorry. I admittedly don't know any by name.
I'm thinking of
Japanese
like Sonny Chiba is really good. He's in his 70s. He was in Kill Bill. He played the guy who made the sword. He had that awesome.
Oh, that's right.
I am making the sword. Yeah, no, but he had a great voice.
Yeah, he was fantastic.
Yeah. I'm not really sure who else is like. The thing is, like, they're definitely like. Well, Ken Watanabe is good. He's not Anthony Hopkins good though, but he is really good. It's not. Listen, I'm sure there's also really great actors too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's sort of hard for me to say off the top of my head to come up with.
Also, is everyone going to be Japanese? The thing is, they could play with it, and they could have even some hosts that aren't. Even the ones who are playing samurai that aren't Japanese, they could do stuff like that. They definitely could have and I'll continue with the theme that I was just talking about. They could have people who are maybe the Western imperialists, trying to influence Japan. Because the history with Japanese imperialism, and then when Western, when there was Western imperialism, and then when they tried to sort of have more influence in Japan, and Japan resisted a lot of that could be an interesting point in time that they could point to that actually coincide. Was it the 1800s? I think it was in the late 1800s. I may be getting that wrong, but that could be an interesting thing.
If Toshiro Mifune was still around, but he's not, he passed away in the 90s, but he was from Seven Samurai. He was Kurosawa's guy. That guy was phenomenal. But
yeah, an interesting thing though. Sorry, I'm making a totally different point, but it could potentially be a world that some people would be attracted to, because the Westworld thing, the Wild West, is people just going crazy, or even if they're not going crazy, they could have their own code, but they could be their own badass person. But with the samurai thing, it could attract people who'd be you have this super sense of honor. You're this ultimate warrior who's gonna save the land or the world with dignity or something like that. I'm sure that could attract people there too. So who doesn't want to be a samurai? Let's be honest.
Yeah, well, I
you
guess
could do duels
too.
Yeah,
but here's an interesting thing. As much as they could fake the swords, the guns, it does seem like you could get hurt with other ways. So they already had knives and stuff. Mm-hmm. So did they already have a way to prevent you from getting hurt by knives? Mm-hmm. I don't know, because when you start getting into that, I think it's a little. I think you know what I'm saying. It's how do you defend against the Kill Bill style stuff?
Yeah, who knows? I think that's a good point that maybe it'll do a different world, and it'll be interesting to see who takes over afterwards. Because, you had the Ed Harris character. If he's still alive, definitely there's going to be some stuff with him, most likely. Maybe too, maybe one of the hosts is gonna take over and create the world. I mean, Bernard is, one of the, it's like the second in command of it. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. So then I guess that there's like a follow-up, which is sort of like, you feel like there is a racism issue at all in the show.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, it's tricky because in a lot of ways it's relatively diverse. I loved that we had, Felix as an Asian guy who was just sort of, he could just be the guy. He's a tech. He's not the smartest guy. He's not the dumbest guy. He's a little dumb. But, he was also, I loved, oh my God, that scene in the finale where he looks at his hands and he's like, what? Am I a host? And she's like, darling, no, you're not a host. Darling, please.
Are you saying you liked how, like, he didn't play into the stereotype? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, that was great. I like that kind of diversity. But,
Yeah.
it always is tricky because the whole native tribe thing is like,
Right.
That's a part of the romance.
Right.
And there definitely seem like they're just, we don't see any native characters.
Right. And that could maybe they will do it, or that could have been definitely something they could have gone with. I mean, that wouldn't have been a crazy thing at all, because part of the whole Western thing is interacting with the indigenous people, and then like having I mean, there were even Western even before Unforgiven. I mean, the Searchers was one of the big ones. I think that was the one with John Wayne, where you sort of saw the perspective, like a little bit of the native tribes there, and so they could have done that, because also there was interaction, and there were times people were taught or they taught some of the settlers ways of tracking, or ways of like guiding them through the land. There could have been stuff there. They did show the tribes being, they're just showing people, them being vicious just in these attacks. And I think that could have been something interesting there, just showing an aspect of it. But you're right, they didn't like expand from there. They just sort of left it like that.
Okay, well, I'd like to. There's two other things I just want to talk about before we, shutter off our mortal coil here. The first thing is the title of the final episode, which is called The Bicameral Mind. Now, do you know what that is?
Well, they said it was like one part of the mind talking to the other.
Yes,
right.
That's right. It comes from an old psychological theory from the 70s, which they mention a little bit. There's like, I don't know if you know much about it. It's called The Origin of Consciousness, and he had this theory. Did you ever read the Neil Stephenson book Snow Crash?
Nope.
All right, it's actually a really good book, but but I would bring it up as a point to help you understand. But if you haven't read it, it's not going to really help.
Right.
But he has this theory that basically people didn't have like real cognitive thought until much more recently. And so he says if you look at like old text, like the Old Testament or like the Iliad, people didn't seem to have like self-awareness. Like, they didn't have introspection. But some of the later things, such as, for example, what they call Ecclesiastes or Kohelet, does, because that came later, or Homer's Odyssey, which was also later. There did seem like it. So he talks about like the gods he thought were something. The reason that they were more anthropomorphic earlier on, and was auditory hallucinations, which was part of the brain talking to you.
Right.
You confused for gods or whatever.
Right. I've heard that theory before. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, this is not a widely accepted theory. It is not. It's not considered to be that is for sure. That's what it is. People don't agree, but it certainly has a compelling feeling. And I think so. But once you understand that, then it kind of makes sense what they're alluding to here in the show about that to become sentient, to become self-aware, more than just thinking, in a sense. Like, they do think, but can they think of themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Is the distinction.
Well, that was the whole thing, because the center of the maze was herself. Remember, that was the whole thing.
Right. So when she talks to herself, when she acknowledges the voice she's hearing is her own voice, that is the resolution of the bicameralism. To
Right.
become one mind.
Right. Right.
And I think I like that. I think that's and I really think that's such an elegant metaphor for that kind of self-introspection, talking to yourself, and I really dug that a lot. And I also liked that she was able to play two different versions of herself in the same scene. That's a nice little acting challenge that she pulled off.
She's talented.
Yeah. So just to sort of wrap it up here a little bit, we look at this show that is the new thing. And Game of Thrones is going to be ending in like a season or two. I think they said 2 more, or maybe 1 more. I think is the last one. Whatever it is, it's like it's not going on forever. But
Right.
Westworld could theoretically have a couple more seasons. Now it's not coming back until 2018.
Right.
And I think I mentioned to you before, but I'll just remind, for the sake of anyone who doesn't know, that Jonathan Nolan, who is one of the co-creators, along with his partner Lisa Joy, was saying that he doesn't understand how the Game of Thrones people do it in a year. He said that's just he said, I'm very impressed, but it's too fast for us.
Yeah.
He said, like, making a movie with Christopher Nolan is like a 3-year effort, and Game of Thrones is somehow 1 year, and their compromise is, well, we can do it in 2. And have it be a huge, expansive, show with all like this, but we can't. Just 1 year is just too short for the amount of work that needs to go into it.
Right.
And my opinion is, just like with George R.R. Martin writing his book, which is if you can get it right, take the time you need.
Right. Yep.
So,
yep. Agreed.
The final question is: we both saw Ex Machina and considered that one of the best movies in 2015. I don't think we disagree on that. That movie had a lot of stuff about consciousness and morality and AI and stuff, and it was amazing. Do you think Westworld is better or worse at all that than Ex Machina?
So here's my answer, which I think this is probably I could say a bunch of different things, but I feel like the closest to the truth is that this is an expanded Ex Machina, essentially. Like, I don't know if the same people writing Ex Machina, or the same person behind it, or whatever, if it were expanded, if it would have been, better necessarily than Westworld, or if Westworld was just one film, whether it would have, because I think you could make an argument that perhaps Westworld would have been just as strong as Ex Machina, or almost as strong. And I mean, overall, Ex Machina, since it didn't have as much room for since it was much like tighter and it was just one thing.
It was also more of a singular vision.
Exactly.
It was Alex Garland who wrote and directed it. So even when he made changes to his own script, when he directed it, he was the one making the change.
Right. So you could say ultimately it succeeded. You could say it had fewer flaws than Westworld, but again, if you're a show. If your entire show with entire season, is it not going to have flaws? So it's nothing to answer,
right.
but
I think part of that, if you're not doing something like Fargo or Black Mirror or whatever, where it's like anthology, where it's supposed to be self-contained in a way, and there is a bit of self-contained, but the idea is you wanted to be able to keep going forward. You want to tell more stories, you can't just wrap it all up. So, although I do think you have a point in that as a unit, Ex Machina is more without flaw. Neither is without flaw, but I think Ex Machina is better from that perspective.
Yeah.
It's one thing is trying to tell you stuff in 2 hours. The other thing is trying to tell you something in 10 hours.
Right.
It's just different.
Right.
And there definitely sometimes in Westworld where I thought this could be tightened a little bit. But in general, I thought it was pretty good for pacing-wise.
Yep.
And that's not always the case. I mean, you look at the Netflix shows; those always seem to have some, some stretch.
Except for Stranger Things, that was pretty.
That was also shorter.
That wasn't
only 10
flawless.
episodes.
That wasn't flawless, but it was pretty close. It was pretty fantastic.
I'm just saying, if you compare it, like, Luke Cage or Jessica Jones or whatever, these seasons were all 13 episodes. Stranger Things, I think, was it 8 episodes?
Yeah, and honestly, I think more shows should do that anyway. Like, I think they should go for a short. I understand if you don't want 4 episodes, but I think 8 to 10.
It was 8 episodes.
Yeah,
and
I think the
was
6
10.
to. I think the 6 to 10 range is. I think 10 really should be the most. I mean, come on.
I think 6 would have been way too low for Westworld.
Westworld, definitely. No, you're right. You're right.
But I think, the thing is, even you cut off 1 episode from Daredevil or Jessica Jones or Luke Cage, you make the show better, for sure.
Yeah.
13 is just unnecessary, and I don't know if that's part of the deal they had with Netflix, where they said you got to do it, because obviously they didn't force Stranger Things, but maybe the Marvel deal is different. Maybe Marvel is the one who insisted on that to get more stuff out of Netflix. I don't know. I don't know the specifics. All I know is that they're all 13 episodes, so there's something going on with that.
Right.
And I think Westworld is just a tighter show. I'm definitely looking forward to what comes next.
Yeah, and I'd recommend it. I would recommend it in general. And here's the other recommendation. I would recommend it to sci-fi fans too. I would say that too.
Definitely.
Which is a separate recommendation. So.
All right. Well, this was fun. I think that'll do it for now.
Okay.
So, nerd you later.
Nerd you later.